Welcome to Thursday Thoughts. I have a interesting topic that kind of came up recently. I wanted to talk about alcohol and chronic pain. Believe it or not, a lot of people still drink even though they have a diagnosis of chronic pain or a diagnosis of some type of illness. You'd be surprised, people still continue to drink. And I don't think doctors really tell you not to drink unless your medication, it does not go, with alcohol. It does not mix with alcohol. But other than that, I've never really heard any doctors say, stay away from alcohol. My doctor did tell me to stay away from alcohol, and, she gave me the reasons why, and it kind of seems very obvious, but apparently not every doctor, does that. But there were some very interesting things when I Googled alcohol and chronic illness. Most of what came up was alcohol and chronic pain. And there's a reason why. And I found this to be very fascinating because I thought I was going to get a lot of information saying, you should stay away from alcohol. Alcohol is the worst thing that you can, that you can drink, or, when you're suffering from a chronic illness. And some of the statistics that came up were very, very interesting. So to start off with, as many as 28% of people with chronic pain use alcohol as a pain management strategy. So people are using alcohol to actually manage their pain and, calm it. Men are more likely to use alcohol for pain management. Higher income people are more likely to use alcohol for pain management. And the reason for this is that alcohol works on the central nervous system, resulting in mild pain reduction. So basically, if you want a pretty decent amount of pain reduction, you're going to need to drink a pretty decent amount of alcohol, which obviously can be very dangerous. Another bizarre thing that came up with my Google search was alcohol use can help with fibromyalgia pain. But I guess in the long term, it actually can also trigger flares, cause sleep disturbance, fatigue, and of course, a hangover. But that's really interesting that it actually does help with fibromyalgia pain. So alcohol, there's a reason why people drink when they're in pain. So of course, there are more reasons not to drink when you're sick than to actually drink. So of course, the number one reason is mixing alcohol and medications. This can increase your risk of liver damage, stomach ulcers, intestinal bleeding, and of course, death. We've always hear about the celebrities that were, mixing drugs and alcohol and, prescription drugs and alcohol, and they end up dying. So obviously that's the number one reason why alcohol is bad for sick people. Also, decreased sleep due to pain and alcohol use combined. So you're already getting bad sleep because you have pain issues. And alcohol, while in the short term it'll knock you out, your sleep cycle is screwed up and you'll end up waking earlier and having more problems sleeping than not. So you're going to have even more reduced sleep, double the reduced sleep because you're drinking and you're in pain. Excessive drinking can lead to withdrawal, which actually increases your sensitivity to pain. So if you're withdrawing from alcohol and you already have pain issues, those pain issues are going to feel even more intense because of the alcohol withdrawal. And of course, this is sort of the extreme side of it. Prolonged excessive drinking can lead to small fiber peripheral neuropathy, which is a painful neurological condition. And a lot of us with chronic health issues, lupus, Lyme disease, already have nerve issues. Some of us already have neuropathy. So drinking can actually cause neuropathy, excessive drinking. So it's just gonna give you more of what you don't want. So for me, what I was told was that alcohol is very inflammatory. So if you have an inflammatory disorder, which this is a short list, there's a lot of them, would be, Crohn's, colitis, ankylosing spondylitis, CIDP, rheumatism, myopathy, interstitial cystitis. Those are all examples of inflammatory conditions. There are also this sort of new category of illnesses known as autoinflammatory diseases, and those are also inflammatory. So drinking alcohol is only going to increase your inflammation and compound that on top of more inflammation if you have a chronic or inflammatory disease. So I was told to stay away from alcohol because I have high levels of inflammation in my body due to illness. So drinking alcohol will only increase inflammation. An example of this is, usually if I drink, or when I used to drink way back when, and I used to drink a decent amount, I'm not talking about I'm passed out drunk, but I drank enough. The next day, regardless of whether I had a hangover or not, I always seemed to have some kind of joint pain. And for some reason, I always thought that was just part of a hangover, but I think that was sort of just my inflammation on top of my inflammation. At the time, I didn't know I was sick, but I always thought it was interesting that I always woke up with joint pain, whereas I never really suffered from any kind of joint pain, if I hadn't been drinking. So, and we know that, like I just mentioned right now, rheumatism, rheumatoid arthritis, those are inflammatory conditions and they attack your joints. So you're drinking on top of, your condition, you're just going to make matters worse. One of the things that I have noticed is that there seems to be sort of a delayed response, at least with me. So even in the short term, if you're drinking and you're like, oh, I'm fine, I don't feel that bad. Sometimes you don't. You'll wake up the next day and you're good and you feel fine. But for me, I notice that there is a bit of a delay in the inflammatory response. So I could drink on a Saturday night and possibly as late as Tuesday, I'll start feeling kind of weird. Like I just have increased stomach problems. My muscles seem different. They seem more exhausted. My symptoms seem a little bit worse. And unfortunately, because of the delay, I don't put the pieces together, and I kind of am just like, oh, I don't know what that was. It was just some kind of a weird, flare or something. But the reason I wanted to approach this topic is because I have spoken with people who have chronic health issues. We know that alcoholism and mental illness are very, very closely tied in. I believe over 50% of people with bipolar depression are alcoholics. I believe people with borderline personality disorder also tend to drink and do drugs excessively. So alcoholism and, mental illness have been, are like cousins. They've gone hand in hand for many, many, many years. But we don't often think of chronic illness or chronic pain and alcoholism. At least I didn't. And it's something that has come up a few times. I've been in support groups and, there's always someone that says, I'm an alcoholic or I'm a recovering alcoholic. I've seen other people that have these chronic conditions, some of the ones that I mentioned on this list, and they're still drinking. They're still going out to bars, drinking, having a good old time. And I think to myself, you have this condition, you should really take care of yourself. So for me, the simplest thing, if you are a chronically ill person, the first thing that you can do to try to minimize your symptoms and to improve your quality of life, the first thing, the one and only easiest thing that you can do is to stop drinking alcohol. It's easier, I have to say it is easier said than done, but I believe that it is absolutely worth it. Because it is so inflammatory and it causes so many other issues. It breaks down into sugar. Sugar is highly inflammatory as well. It's sort of the most, I don't want to say the easiest thing to do, but it's kind of the number one thing that people that are sick should do, or at least attempt it to see if it does help your symptoms even a little bit. So that's my Thursday thoughts for today. I'm very passionate about this, and I'm even more passionate about this now that I read these statistics that I was totally shocked by. I couldn't believe that, you know, almost 30% of people with a chronic pain actually use alcohol to soothe their pain. But this also may have a lot to do with insurance, access to medication, you know, restrictions on narcotic medications, and difficulties getting prescriptions for that. So there are a lot more politics that go into this, but, you know, for now, I feel like this is just, you know, one of those things that every sick person should at least try.